What's happening, guys? Scott Bancroft here. Welcome back to another video. It's excellent to have you back. It is great to see you, and in today's video we're going to be going into how to create a panorama image on Adobe Lightroom. The use of a panorama is infinite. It enables you to shoot a wide-angle shot without having a wide-angle lens. You're essentially using the widest part of your lens, turning it portrait, and then just creating a stack of photos across the scene, and you can stitch it together in post-production, and you'll find that you'll get a very high resolution wide-angle shot. This definitely isn't replacing the traditional wide-angle lens and landscape shot that I usually do, but if you don't have the lens there for you, you can make it work by using this panorama technique. There's an infinite amount of ways that you can shoot a panorama, and you can get different types of equipment, but for this photo that we're going to be going through today, I just use a simple tripod. So let's dive on into Lightroom and load up the few images that I took, and I'll show you how I did it. So we've just loaded up into Lightroom now, and I've gone and taken a series of 10 photos in 15-degree increments. My tripod's nice, it's got some degree increments on its rotating ball head, so I can easily align the camera and not lose track of where I'm at. So let's scroll through the photos now, and I'll show you where we started and where we're going to finish. Starting on the left, we've got the city as well as Circular Quay, and in 15-degree increments we pan across to the right and we start finding the Sydney Opera House as well as the start of the Harbour Bridge in the background. So the best thing about editing with Lightroom is the edits you put on one photo, you can just sync them straight across. So let's edit the first photo, sync them across to the others, and then we can merge it straight away. So looking at the photo now, I want to remove the chromatic aberration that may be there on Enable Lens Profile Corrections, and then we're going to start color correcting. It was a pretty gloomy day. It was grey, it was overcast, the cloud was super low. You can see it on the left hand side there surrounding the buildings. And I'm just adjusting the colour for the clouds. I know that the foreground looks a bit orange and yellow, but I just want those clouds to look as natural as possible from what I saw them as. I'm going to leave the tint the way it is. I might boost the exposure just a little bit and add some contrast. I'm going to tone down the highlights and boost the shadows just to get some of that detail back in the buildings and the stairs to the left of the photo. Pressing Option and sliding the white slider, we can select where the white point is. And we're going to do the same with the black point. Holding Option, sliding to the left, we can select which pixels are completely black. And I will generally just find a few pixels to know that the photo has its maximum dynamic range of pure black pixels and pure white pixels. It is looking quite bright, so let's bring that exposure back down now, and it's around -0.1, and that's looking quite reasonable. It does look very orange in the foreground, and we're going to fix that with the color sliders very soon. I'm going to boost a bit of the dehaze. In my last video we spoke about dehaze, and this is a perfect example for it. There was constant light drizzle in the scene, and it does create a bit of haze within the photo, so let's use dehaze to get rid of that and add a bit more clarity to the photo. It was pretty cold and miserable that day, and I wanted the photo to reflect that, and it is pretty desaturated at the moment. So I'm going to use the saturation slider for the first time in the tutorials, and that's because I want it to be a global effect. I don't want the muted colors to be adjusted only, I want all the colors to be adjusted. So let's slide all the way down to the orange color on the HSL color panel and bring the oranges down. That's going to remove some of the saturation within the stone of the steps, as well as the foreground and even the buildings. But I do want to add a bit of color into the trees to create a bit of vibrance. Like, it's not totally dire here in Sydney. It was nice, it was great to be out and taking photos. So I've just pushed the hue across to the more tealer colors, and I've brought the saturation and luminance down to create a bit of contrast. Sliding all the way down, I'm going to pull the sharpening out, so I'm going to add that later, and I'm going to leave the noise reduction as it is. I'm not going to do any geometry or transform corrections because it will do its own transformations to merge all the photos. You don't want to start individually editing each photo and then it doesn't merge properly. So you leave it as raw as possible with a few minor color corrections, and then after it's merged, then we can start creating the final photo. And that's looking quite nice. I might bring the highlights a touch down to see if I can get some detail out of the clouds, and you can just see it popping up there around that tall building. And I might actually just boost the saturation of the blue in the water to create another color pop. Beautiful. That's looking really nice now. So what we're going to do is we have this first photo selected. We're going to hold Shift and we're going to click the last photo in our sequence, and they all get highlighted. We're going to right click on any of the photos and go to photo merge and select panorama. And depending how quick your computer is, it could take a couple of seconds, a couple of minutes, but the result is definitely worth it. So your photos just loaded up now, and part of you saying, wow, it actually merged all my photos together and it's looking pretty cool. But then the other half of you is starting to panic because you don't know what's going on with the borders and all hell's about to break loose. But don't stress about these edges, because we've got two ways that we can easily fix this while keeping the photo looking natural. You can either press auto crop, which is going to find all the pixels in the photo that can be cropped and remove all the uneven edges, but this is going to leave you with a super skinny image. It's not my favorite way of doing this, but it is definitely doable. There are going to be times where you're going to need to use auto crop. Some photos just won't be able to use the next method, and that's fill edges. What it does is it creates a collection of pixels from around your photo and recreates what it thinks should be there. And it's going to work on this photo because our edges are actually quite bland or easy to recreate. We've got clouds, there's no defined way of drawing a cloud, so it's easy to create that mottled texture. And there's quite a strong pattern in the foreground that it can recreate. So let's go and click fill edges and see exactly what it does. But before we finish editing this image, I'm just going to show you a couple of idiosyncrasies that do come with shooting panoramas, and they are easy enough to remove, but if you know what's going to happen with the panorama, you learn to shoot around it. I chose to continue with this composition even though I knew that this would happen, purely so I could show you guys what could happen if you shoot straight lines with a panorama. Let's have a look here at the foreground. All these lines can be used as leading lines, but if you look towards the bottom right, what is a straight line in real life starts curving. You can also see in this line here that I'm circling with the mouse, it just randomly shifts across a couple of pixels. And that's because the program doesn't know exactly what you were shooting. It can pick up patterns, but it's not going to be 100% correct. It's never going to replace taking it with an ultra wide angle lens, but it is easy enough to pop it into Photoshop, shift that around. You can even just crop that bottom part of the photo off if you don't want it completely, and that's what I'm probably going to do with this photo. Another little idiosyncrasy you get with shooting panoramas, if there are people walking around, you may capture the same person as they are walking at the same pace of your camera rotating. So it might end up being like a little Where's Wally exercise where you have to then remove that person that has now featured 10 times in the same photo. So now all we have to do is press merge, and it's going to load that image as a separate file and a .dng, which is Adobe's RAW file. So we keep all that beautiful clarity and pixel data, and you can see its progress bar in the top left-hand side of Lightroom there, saying creating panorama. And again, however fast your computer is, that's how long it's going to take. Alrighty, our photo's been merged, it's in Lightroom, and we can start editing the individual photo. To stop you from getting bored and listening to me edit this photo in its entirety, I'm just going to tell you what I'm going to do. We're going to speed edit through it, and then we're going to finish up. So with this photo, I'm looking at it. I'm going to pull those highlights down a little bit more to get that detail in the top right of the sky. I'm going to remove the security guards in the back part of the photo, and then I might even take it into Photoshop to see if we can remove some of the distortion, as well as this railing that is quite obtrusive. And like I said before, once everything's done, then I'm going to crop it. I don't want to crop just yet in case I need those pixels later. So that's about it for today's video. If you liked this video, you found it interesting, please hit that like button. Subscribe if you want to see more. Hit that bell if you want to be notified, or see me on Instagram and you'll find a story every time I post. And I'll see you guys in the next video.